Gonna hit publishing today. The physically publishing. I don't mean like the whole philosophy of. I was gonna talk about something else before I went to sleep, but after letting the brain run wild without the conscious taking control, I think publishing is what I need to go over, because that's what I woke up thinking about. Publishing is that step that everybody thinks is like the final solution. Publishing is like the water break on the marathon. You know, the break where you're changing from swimming to your bike on the triathlon. It's not, publishing is not the end state. It's not the final. You're not going to be done with anything when you push publish, because there's a bunch of stuff you got to do between now and then, and when people are actually physically buying your stuff. So publishing is kind of drudgery. It's not fun. It's a lot of detail work. It's a lot of going back and forth, checking, making sure stuff fits, etc. Any mistakes that you've made up until that point, typically, especially with like Amazon, any mistakes you've made in your manuscript or in your cover or anything like that become glaringly obvious, and the machine presents it like just cold matter of fact. Like it just tells you fix this, and you're sort of hung up until you finish. It's not horrible. It's the physical process of publishing is relatively easy. And once it's done, it's done. You typically don't have to worry about it again. Making a physical book is a little bit more demanding, because Amazon likes to make sure that you send out proofs and stuff to yourself, which is annoying. It's basically like finishing a midterm paper. You hand it in, the teacher sends it back to you and says, you know, here, check your own work. So that's that proofing process on a physical book for that book creation piece is a little bit irritating, and you could get piles and piles of proofs stacking up if you're prolific, or if you're making a bunch of errors. So don't make errors. Once you've got your story and you've done your storytelling, you've mastered your dialogue, and you've presented everything in such a way that it actually makes coherent sense, you have to go through the soul-killing process of editing, where you go through and you reread and you take out the bad stuff and you make it sound good, and you make sure that your chapters have the same hair color, your characters have the same hair color all the way through, stuff like that. Because it's really kind of doofy when your character has one eye color and then you change it midway through. But once you push publish, all those little no-nos that you've made in your story, they all become apparent to everybody else in the world. And that's a little bit nerve-wracking. Because basically you've now shared your mistakes with the world. So it's no different than handing a paper in to get graded in school. You're going to get graded, except the whole world is going to grade you. So you got to be kind of confident in what you're doing. You have to be confident in your work. That's why the editing process is so important. You don't want to publish a crappy draft, because it's not just going to be your teacher saying, here's your C. It's going to be the whole world saying everything bad that your teacher ever told you about one of your papers. But they're going to be those people on the internet who have absolutely no accountability or soul, and they're just going to be ugly just because people on the internet are ugly. And there's no repercussions for them being ugly. so they feel they have the right to be ugly to others on the internet. And once you've pushed publish, all that is laid bare. You put that book in front of everybody. You put that story in front of everybody. And I think when I was filming my first video, I mentioned the Pareto principle of the 80-20. What are the 20% of things that produce the 80% of the results? And the process of publishing your work is not necessarily something that gets you paid for your work. The process of publishing your work is kind of that step that is necessary in order for your work to be of value to anyone. So if everything you do is unpublished, nobody's ever going to see it, and you're never going to finish the process. You're never going to hand in that paper. You're never going to get that grade. You're going to fail the class because you never did anything. So I'm sitting here and I've got like shit. A tanker truck wants to join me in my lane. Sorry, tanker truck. So when you're publishing your work, and I'm going to switch over to first person. When I'm publishing my work, I'm always sort of stuck because I know that I've got a lot of work that's already been done. And my biggest fear as somebody who has published a bunch of books is publishing that book and then having it disappear down the memory hole. So there's something like 1 million books a month being published on Amazon every month now. And that's an unfathomable number. How many of those books make it into the top 100? Not many, because the books that are sitting on the top 100 are already on the top 100 for month after month after month after month. So you got to do a bang up job of putting everything together. You can't just publish something on a wish and then cross your fingers silently behind your computer desk and expect to become a bazillionaire. And the act of publishing, for me, I've kind of put that into the gotta do it later category. And I think I'm reaching the point where I need to get back into the physical flow of publishing things and producing book content, even if it's as a 20% activity, even if it's as an 80% activity that does the 20% of yields, because, and I know that sounds backwards because it is, but without the fresh new content coming out periodically, it's not gonna click. One of the things that I've been working with on the publishing front is I've been looking at all the pieces and parts that I'm getting done during the day, and those kind of things are the workflows. If you kind of like graph out the time allocation I'm putting into things, the workflows are and the time allocations are changing. So for like the last year, I've put together a bunch of infrastructure and built the website. I've built up a bunch of different stuff in the publishing support area, and I've learned a bunch of things. I've done a bunch of classes, learned how to use imaging and that sort of stuff. So now I can like basically create a cover, things like that. I've learned a bunch of other skills, and I think that I'm reaching that point where I can start curtailing some of those activities, and I can start putting that information to use instead of storing it in little squishy parts of my brain. So I think I need to start pushing the publish button more frequently now, and basically change my time allocation. I can't allow myself to sit back and produce these stories and build this backlog of unpublished material. I need to start putting that stuff out again, using the infrastructure that I've built. And that's kind of important because the infrastructure now exists. I'm going to put a caveat on that, because the only piece of the infrastructure that I do not believe I have a firm grasp on right now is that email list. And I think I ranted about that on Wednesday. It's Friday today. Congratulations. Happy Friday, everybody. Or whatever happy day you're in right now. So the email list is kind of the last major long tent pole I need to get. What you doing, buddy? The email list is kind of the last major tent pole I need to get stood up. And then I think I really need to start thumping through putting work out. Now it's October, whatever the hell day it is. I think it's October 25th. And Halloween is like 6 days away. And because I'm a dum-dum, I didn't even pay attention to what day it was. And so I'm a little bit behind. I'm putting out a Halloween story that I've had written for like a year. I held off on it for like a story contest, and I got second in the story contest, and then I forgot to republish it everywhere else. But that's cool. So I'm gonna put that story out today. But as far as getting into the flow and like the consistent workflow of pushing send and publishing books so that they actually show up in the world, I think the infrastructure piece is almost there on my end. I think I need to really start publishing my work more frequently, because once that email list that I talked about on Wednesday is back in place, and I think I have a coherent, and I have had a coherent email system put into place, I think it's going to be a much smoother process. So I think the final remaining steps before I start consistently publishing all of the work that I produce is sit down for a day and map out where and how I want my email stuff to flow. I got to finish the physical production of the email system stuff, and then I have got like 4 full-length books and like 2 regular sized stories that are just sitting waiting for me to get my head out of my rear end and actually publish on. So I think it's time to start really, I got to get the email thing cleaned up first. And then when the email thing is cleaned up and that final tent pole is stood up and the personal author brand infrastructure and that foundation is laid, I think I need to get my head out of my ass and actually start publishing, because it's essential. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's probably the 1% thing that got to get done to get like the 99% of all of your success finished is actually pushing publish. So I think I might need to reshuffle my priorities and get hot and heavy onto that whole pushing the button on the publishing thing. But it's Friday and I gotta finish my non-affiliated Black Rifle coffee and go choke people. So have a great Friday, everybody.